Hey, good afternoon, everyone. You guys hear me okay in the back? I think I see a faint nod. All right, so we filled up kind of early, so I guess we can get a little bit of an early start, too. So my name is Matt Green. I'm from a company called Bastian Solutions. If you guys don't know who we are, we're a full-service material handling integrator. What does that mean for you? We see a lot of different applications from different industries, small, medium, and large companies, and different levels of automation, manual processes. I'd like to share some of that with you guys. So I'm the regional manager for our company. I cover the Southeast. I'm also here with my aerodynamic compatriot, Brian Reinhardt. He covers the Texas and surrounding region. And one of our consulting engineers, Tim Duquette. So we're going to talk about maximizing ROI. So I have an easy question. Is automation good? All right, we'll all say internally, yes, of course it is, but what does that really mean? And where do we maximize potential for ROI? There are a bunch of different solutions that we could apply. Where is it going to be a little bit better than some of the other ones? So Tim is going to talk a little later about some specific case studies, different companies who have implemented different automation technologies and what they have meant. Hopefully that'll spark some new conversation, maybe have you guys see some of the exhibits here in MODEX in a different light. But first, I kind of wanted to talk about the most natural thing in an automation brief, talk about manual processes, kind of get us in the mindset, hey, what's the difference? What kind of things can we see? And where maybe some low-hanging fruit is when we're looking at our own internal processes. So there are a myriad of different methodologies that we can look at for improving our processes. One of them that we talk about is lean. We all probably heard of that 100 times. Sometimes we talk about the 7 lean wastes. Sometimes you'll see the 8 lean wastes. The first ones are pretty standard. The 8th one is the one that kind of comes and goes. That's the non-utilization of talent. I'll talk about that one in a little bit, but basically we pay humans for human thought. Sometimes we're guilty of sticking people in what we'd call mindless jobs. We're paying this person for not using this human thought. So what other problems might we have? When we're doing that, we can introduce error, human error into these processes. And there are other things that machines would maybe be able to do better. So I asked the easy question earlier, is automation good? Now we know it's efficient, but there are a couple of reasons, hey, why do we automate from a high level? There are 2 big things that most people key in on. Number 1, we reduce costs. Number 2, we increase throughput. Now, is that a warehouse and distribution? Is that a manufacturing operation? We're worried about getting more product out the door. So let's talk about both of those. But first, let's talk about the throughput side. Both companies want both things, but in reality, one of those is going to take precedence over the other, given market conditions, given their history with the operation, things like that. So I visited a high-tech welding fab shop. They produce giant, high-pressure vessels for the oil and gas industry. They had fantastic welders. They paid their welders about double the national average. They did not have a problem with retention. They didn't really have a problem with quality. They had a problem with finding more people who were good enough to do the job. I've walked around with a lot of operations managers who said pretty much the exact same thing. I've hired everybody in my market that I can. There's nobody left. I've hired them all. Finding labor is a problem. So what this company ended up doing, they had to outsource a lot of their work. They were still able to keep up some of those orders, but at a significantly reduced margin. Sometimes they flat out declined business. Walking through their facility, one thing I noticed is their welders aren't always welding. They're moving some of this equipment around just by the nature of it. You have to turn it, flip it, move it to a downstream process. We want to keep our people engaged in a value-add process. And if a welder isn't welding, he's not making the company money. Sure, we have a lot of similar situations in other industries as well that we can think of. So another thing we talk about with value add is what time is spent doing that process. We don't want to waste it. So non-utilization of talent. I met with an apparel distributor once. Very standard distribution operation. They bring bulk product in, they break it apart, store it, fill orders. They had one guy that struck me as kind of a unique situation. His job, 8 hours a day, was to take waste cardboard to the trash can. I felt bad for the guy. 8 hours a day, that's all I did was just carry boxes. I integrate a lot of trash lines. Just plain simple belted conveyor. Generally people are looking, hey, let's pick up a couple extra, points in utilization of our employees, things like that. I've never done one before that got rid of 8 whole hours of work where this guy could do 10 other different jobs that were going to add value to the company instead of just taking the trash out. Like our marketing team put a nice orange on the back. I mentioned to them low-hanging fruit. So, here we go. Another one of the lean wastes I want to talk about is motion. So in a picking operation, you want people picking. If they're moving from one place to the next, they're not adding value. That's a wasted motion. So we're looking right here is called a pick module. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with it. What they're doing is called a pick and pass operation. You have a set number of operators who are an expert in their 10 or 20 feet. They know where every location is of all their products. They're software directed. It's, hey, let me pick my area, and I pass the box on to the next. They're not walking from one aisle to the next, or even from one spot to the next within the same aisle. Really high utilization on those employees, which really increases the throughput of the operation. All right, so we just talked a couple ways to increase throughput. Next, let's talk about the other half of the equation of why we automate, reducing the cost. Now, there are a lot of different costs that are associated with any one of these operations. Labor is one that we hear about all the time, but there are a lot of other ones. There was a little graphic up there a second ago that said defects. So reducing headcount, that's one part, getting people reallocated. But FTEs, spending time with overtime. We can make them more efficient. We're not actually reducing people, but we are saving money by making them better at their job. We can talk about facility costs, the square footage that we're using for the operation. If we can make it more efficient, more dense storage, we can save money that way. Turnover cost. When people are turning over, they have to spend time in training. There's a ramp-up period for getting more acclimated to the new process, where they're not as efficient as their more veteran brothers and sisters in the operation. But I wanted to go back to that one I talked about first, defects. What you saw in this video was what we call pick-to-light technology. Guys are probably familiar with this a lot. When somebody walks in a manual process from one location to the next using a paper pick ticket, you're introducing human error. You're moving a little more slowly. You're keeping your quality control people downstream a little bit more busy. When we're doing pick-to-light, we're not just moving faster and moving more accurately. There's another cost that's associated with that, and that's customer retention. When you're shipping things out incorrectly, customers get frustrated. There's no secret about that one. So as business leaders, one thing we have to look at is what's the difference between our customer retention cost and our customer acquisition cost. So that's another factor to keep in mind when you're looking at different technology selections for your newly automated process. By being more accurate, you can help keep that customer retention higher. You don't have to spend as much money on the customer acquisition because they're already there and you're keeping them. So I have a quick chart up here kind of comparing throughputs and accuracy of different picking technologies. So down here at the bottom, we're talking about very manual processes. So paper picking, it's dark on dark, it's hard to see. Paper picking, moving up through RF picking, voice commands, different types of vertical and horizontal carousels, pick to light that we had just talked about, and then fully automated goods to man shuttle technology type of applications. Now a couple things I want to point out. You look up here on the y-axis, you start about 90% accurate. And people are going to say, well, 90%, that means a 10% defect rate. Is that right? Nobody's really shipping out 10% wrong. Let's hope not. If you are, let's talk. But nobody ships out 10% wrong. But maybe what you're doing is the picker picks something up, like, oh, wait, this one's wrong. Let me go back and I'm going to redo it. Or maybe, hey, it gets through their process and it goes down to quality control downstream. Both of those are wasted time. Slows down the picker, and hey, it adds more quality control element to the operation. Both of those can be leaned out with more accurate picking. And then some amount is still going to slip through the cracks, go out to your customers with that mispick, the inaccuracy, and it's not what we want reflected on us. Another thing that people are surprised when I show this is the magnitude of change from one end to the other. Talking about somewhere in the 100 to 150 pick per hour ballpark on a manual process. With increasing levels of automation, I mean, you're getting nearly a tenfold increase on throughput. So you hit the same throughput with significantly reduced labor costs while also maintaining the accuracy. Now, you're not going to jump straight from a paper pick ticket to the most advanced, $10 million system you're going to see out on the floor. There's a progression of things. So, hey, we move up one step at a time. Say an RF gun, moving into, say, voice-directed picking, and then eventually to, an example of some kind of goods-to-person technology. For that high-end goods-to-person technology, there is a great payback if there's a high throughput. But that may not apply to everybody. I want to talk about maximizing ROI. Sometimes if it's a smaller operation, lower throughput operation, step one can be a good warehouse management system, a WMS. And then you move on from there. You have cash flow that feeds back into itself and helps grow the business with the customer demand. Now, what are some of the challenges that are associated with some of these technologies and with any process in general? One I want to cover is employee turnover. So, I think I'm seeing a lot in a manual process. I see high turnover. I visited a customer one time. He dealt in some used goods that they were shipping out. He told me, Matt, my hardest time of year is April. I'm like, well, that's weird. I always hear November, December, Black Friday, everyone's shipping out for the holidays. Why April? And he looks at me. He's like, well, that's when everybody gets their tax refunds. Nobody shows up to work for a month. It blew me away. But that's a prime example of underutilization of talent. If people aren't happy in their jobs, as soon as they get a couple of bucks, they're walking away. You want people to be happy in their jobs. You want them to be excited to go home, tell their families about what they're doing. People want to work for innovative companies. They want to work with robotics or shuttles or something they can be proud of to go tell their families about. I had another guy I talked to. There's a barrel manufacturer. Guy stands here. Barrels get the bottom put on here. He flips them over. The barrel tops get put on here. He heard about them putting a robot in to flip the barrels. He was so excited. He'd been working flipping barrels for 30 years. That was his job for 30 years. He says, I don't want to die flipping barrels. I think were his exact words. He was so excited to go to something else in the factory. He stuck it out. But I mean, how many other people would have? All right, so let's go back to how we're scaling. You don't have to spend on a computer software system, multi-million dollars on a huge ERP. There are cloud solutions that you can implement, sometimes like a monthly subscription fee, and then move up into a larger WMS, and then eventually that full-scale software suite, that ERP. And different levels of sizes of organizations may require different amounts of software type of automation. The idea is that the cash flow generated from one helps you reinvest in the business and make those future investments later on that are going to help drive more cash flow. It's basically an iterative process. It's a big feedback loop. Kind of cash in, it's going to pull more out, and goes back in again. Just reinvesting in yourself. So there are a lot of factors that complicate these issues, different nuances in the processes on where we choose to automate, what technologies might be the best fit. One of the things to remember, like e-commerce, for example, is kind of changing the market. We see a lot of that, not just in e-commerce, but all of us are consumers, and we all do business. We take our same consumer preferences to work with us. And, I want to order something off Amazon and have it be at my house in 2 days. When I go to work, I don't want to wait for a 12-week lead time either. So it kind of permeates the whole market. So even if we're not doing direct-to-consumer shipping, we're still kind of feeling some of the same pressures. Now, how do we maximize that ROI? I didn't present you a ton of solutions. Tim is. He's one of our consulting engineers. He's going to show you a few case studies on different companies who have done different things and how it impacted them. Go ahead.
All right, can you hear me okay? Good. All right, thanks, Matt. So like Matt said, in the next section of slides, I'm going to talk more about some of the different technologies that we can utilize to automate and streamline business operations. And clearly, automation is not going to be one size fits all. And so for that purpose, we've broken the slides out into 3 different tiers, I'll call them. I'll refer to them as entry level, mid, and high levels of automation. Within each of these, I'm going to talk about a few technologies, both hardware and software, that we often see as appropriate next steps into automating within each tier. We'll also highlight a case study, as Matt mentioned, of how a few of these different technologies, these will be facilities that we've implemented or that we've seen that are good examples of how some of these technologies within each tier can be integrated together. So let's start with a few entry-level technologies. These technologies that we're talking about in this category are often appropriate for facilities that are expanding their operations, trying to keep up with growth, and of course, as with everybody, trying to improve throughput capacity, storage capacity, and maintain adaptability and flexibility to a changing market. We pick technologies in this area are those that have significant benefits, but at a more affordable level of investment, making them ideal first steps into automation. One area of warehousing, manufacturing, and distribution that usually gets the first attention when trying to streamline your processes is picking. A few very popular methodologies regarding picking in this entry-level category would be things like pick modules, oftentimes done for split-case picking, full-case pick areas, or high-velocity pick areas for your fastest-moving SKUs. That last one, high-velocity areas, will become even more important for operations with a very steep Pareto, meaning that a small subset of the SKUs account for a very large portion of the order flow. With a lot of these, conveyor plays a pretty significant role. Allowing operators to pick directly to conveyor rather than have to walk around loads and do that unnecessary travel time and transportation can really optimize the pick path, the pick process, and pick execution. A very popular way that this is often done with pick modules, for example, is what we would call conveyor zone routing. Using powered conveyor to route cartons through a pick module in different zone picking areas can allow volume to flow into the areas where it needs work, and in those areas, the operators that are staffed there serve as local experts. But the traffic can avoid going into areas where it doesn't need any picks, all in order to streamline the pick efficiency and the pick task sequences. Another critical focus for most facilities is going to be storage capacity. And there's a lot of options to improve beyond single deep selective rack. These might be storing multi-deep using pushback rack, or maybe going narrow or very narrow aisle. Choosing between these different storage methods will be driven by the product being stored and any regulation around it. So for example, an operation with a low number of SKUs but a very high amount of storage for each one might lend itself well to deep lane storage. But if there's a high number of unique SKUs or lot control requirements, those are often prohibitive to going deep lane, so what you might want to go is narrow. And in those cases, very narrow aisle may be the best option to improve your storage density. Facilities at this level are generally run by a warehouse management system, or WMS, whose main function is to oversee the warehousing operations and communicate with the ERP or business software that's running the operation. These warehouse management systems offer a very wide breadth of modules, but the most common ones are focused around order management and inventory tracking. So as one example of a facility that uses this entry-level technology well, let's look at a publishing distributor who recently worked with Bastian to consolidate 2 existing distribution centers into one streamlined facility. Their new facility focused on 3 picking areas. They had a 2-level pick module, a full-case pick area for their highest volume movers, and they also used VNA for their reserve racking. And this application of VNA actually allowed them to not only consolidate 2 facilities into one building, but to leave sufficient room for their aggressive 5-year growth plan. Outside of the picking areas, conveyor was used to tie these all together and route cartons through areas where they could be manually inspected for quality control, receive dunnage and taping sealing before going out the door, either as parcel or LTL volume. And all of this was run by a new warehouse management system that controlled all of these components, even the routing on the conveyor. And this combination of what we're calling entry-level technology allowed the operation to quickly see a 167% increase in throughput, going from 600,000 units in their peak season up to 1.6 million units the following year with this new system. So let's transition and talk a little bit about this mid-level technologies. Stepping up to this next level of automation may be driven by the need for significant process improvements, keeping up with sustained order growth, and doing so with an efficiently utilized labor pool. This may include, on the picking side, enhancing your picking operation with things like pick-to-light or pick-to-voice technology. Both of these are very firmly established and robust, leading to measurable gains in productivity and accuracy. They also tend to come with increased employee satisfaction due to their optimized task sequences. In addition to a conveyor that runs through pick areas and marries up multiple streams, it may also make sense to use higher speed sortation at this level. Sorters come in varying shapes, sizes, and types, and they can be tailored to fit your operation and the product that you're transporting. A few examples here would be things like shoe sorters, tilt tray, narrow belt, cross belt sorters. They all have kind of their own specialties and pros and cons, but between them they cover a very wide selection of product types, dimensions, and different rates that you may need. For some operations at this level, introduction of robotic handling may also make sense. In addition to throughput gains that you're going to achieve, there's also significant ergonomic benefits to be had here. And oftentimes you can just keep operators out of harmful or dangerous working environments. Functions like robotic palletizing or layer handling find their niche when product is a little bit more uniform with strong quality and robust packaging that can be clamped or vacuum gripped by robots. This level of automation may come with warehouse control system in addition to WMS. And as its name implies, a warehouse control system really manages the automated equipment within a facility and communicates very tightly with the warehouse management system as well. There's a lot of WCS providers out there, and they can generally offer pretty good packages in terms of modularity and expandability. One other software package you may see at this level would be a labor management system as well. This would help you enhance things like tracking and reporting, productivity metrics, and workload balancing of the labor pool. So for a case study of this mid-level automation, let's look to a cosmetic supplier who partnered with Bastian to achieve several measurable goals, namely throughput, improvements on pick accuracy, improved customer service levels, and ergonomic environment for all of their operators. Because of the need for all of these improvements and to support their 5- and 10-year growth plans, this facility pursued several of the mid-level technologies that I've talked about. The main enhancement here was in their pick module. In addition to conveyor with zone routing, they implemented pick-to-light, and that quickly allowed their operators to see a 29% gain in efficiency, with individual operators now achieving 840 units per hour per person. They also stepped up to a state-of-the-art warehouse control system to improve their visibility, tracking, and monitoring, and with very high-level human-machine interface capabilities to run the system and monitor it. One other nice feature of this example is that it was installed without interrupting the current operations. So it provided a seamless transition from their old model to the use of the new technologies. So for high-level technologies, there's seemingly endless possibilities to choose from when selecting a few to discuss up here. This is largely due to new methodologies in material handling, new technological advancements, and new and changing customer demands and customer expectations. A few examples would be things like automatic unloading of trucks at the dock doors. Now we have solutions to do that either by AGVs or case handling robotic systems. There's a number of goods-to-person systems that can reduce or even eliminate the costly travel time of pickers performing each picking. Another example is robotics, which are no longer limited to stationary bases, but can now travel through pick areas as mobile robotics. And as you would expect, this step up in automation comes with more complex demands on the software and controls packages. So warehouse control systems become vital to help the operation run like a well-oiled machine. But you also hear the term at this level, warehouse execution system, or WES. And we use that term when the managing software encompasses both warehouse management and warehouse control capabilities all in one. There's numerous packages that may be involved in a warehouse execution system, but you may see modules like advanced order waving and release down to the floor, batch pick optimization, and sequenced loading of loads onto the trucks as they go outbound. The demands on tracking and reporting also escalate. They take the step from requiring real-time visibility all the way up to proactive and even preventative reporting. Because these facilities have to handle very high demand in an extremely efficient manner, there isn't always a large enough labor pool or enough space on the floor to keep adding bodies to a growing operation. And so integrated automation can be a strong alternative. It's also worth noting that sites at this level of automation can also serve as very strong show sites as well. So for the final case study, let's look at an apparel retailer who implemented several of these technologies with a very state-of-the-art warehouse. At the center of this is a goods-to-person picking system where they're using 16 aisles of a shuttle-based picking technology. Within the aisles, robots retrieve inventory bins, which are then presented at the end of each aisle to pickers. And that presentation is actually paired with pick-to-light technology as well. So you can see the section of the inventory bin that's requiring a pick gets illuminated to guide the operator through the simple pick process. All functions from the operators are performed out of custom ergonomic workstations as well. Outside of this pick area, conveyor is used extremely well to automate the flow of cartons from start to finish through the facility. On the front end, that means carton erectors and labelers that induct new work automatically into the system. And on the back end, cartons travel through inline scales, dunnage inserters, and taper sealers. Another unique feature of this facility that you can see as it goes by in the video is robotic document insertion. So there's 2 robots with vacuum end-of-arm tools that are inserting packing slips, individual pieces of paper, into outbound loads right before they're sealed and go out the door. All of this is run by a sophisticated warehouse management package along with multiple controls platforms. And it actually allows the operation to process orders within as little as 15 minutes from receipt. Kind of as the last note here, there's many additional technologies, new cutting-edge advancements, in addition to what I've talked about so far. Some of the most exciting buzzwords you'll hear and see out on the floor at MODEX are things like advanced goods-to-person in shuttles, augmented reality, collaborative robotics, and Internet of Things. These technologies and others like them allow even the highest volume operations to automate along with the rapidly growing and changing world of material handling. Now I'm going to hand over to Brian. He's going to talk a little bit more about implementation requirements and approaches.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? All right. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Matt. I've been trying to think of a good comeback for that aerodynamic crack, but look at that hair. I got nothing. But, all right, so we talked about a lot of stuff so far. We've talked about some of the key identifiers for a non-automated, non-utilized facility, and then we've talked about some of the technologies that you'll want to consider when automating. So what we want to talk about next is some of the ways that you can mitigate your risk, reduce your upfront capital, some of the things to look out for when implementing a system, and then after you do implement a system, how do you ensure it runs properly so that you see that realization on your investment. So, for instance, I want to kind of circle back to one of the technologies that Tim was talking about, the pick module. So let's say that we've identified a pick module that works for your facility. It might seem like a daunting investment at all at once, right? We've got carton and pallet flow rack, we've got pick-to-light, we've got zone routing conveyor, we've got all this stuff going in. Well, what if we break it apart? So first we just put in the carton and the pallet flow rack. You still use your paper-based system, you still have operators walking around, possibly with a push cart or something like that, but now we've got a better storage mechanism. Then a couple quarters later, we'll come and put in the pick-to-light. So they're still walking around, but now we've sped up their pick rates, we've sped up their efficiencies, right? And now a couple quarters later, we put in the zone routing conveyor. So now we've really enhanced the system. And what at one point looked like a daunting investment has now been broken apart into 3 manageable modules to make sure that you've mitigated your risk along the way. And that's how you'll kind of pave the way to a successful automation implementation. So when going through all this though, one of the keys to mitigating this risk is the project planning phase. You're utilizing multiple manufacturers, you've got mechanical installers, electrical installers, you've got software guys, making sure that the equipment shows up on time, that it's ready to be unloaded. Do we have a place to store that equipment when it gets on site? Are the installers coming on time? Are the mechanical installers getting there before the electrical installers? All that coordination needs to be done up front and properly to ensure that you're going to realize your investment. And to really mitigate that and lower that risk, you're going to want to make sure you've selected a partner that helps you with that. So another really good way to mitigate risk is to consider a pilot project, or as I mentioned, a phased implementation. From a mechanization standpoint, this often works best when your equipment is going to be operating in an island of automation, i.e. it's not necessarily interacting with other equipment. So think of a robotic palletizing operation, right? You've got the throughput and the demand to require 5 robotic palletizing cells, and you're confident that it's going to work and that's what your business needs. Well, instead of putting all 5 in, do a pilot phase. Put in 1 robotic palletizer, work out the kinks, ensure that the solution you've designed works properly, and then take those lessons learned back to the manufacturing facility, fix or improve the other 4 accordingly, and then roll them all out. That way, you're not making field adjustments on 5 different solutions. So that's a way to kind of minimize your risk and investment up front. And I know people think of pilot projects with just robotics, but it really works for any type of automation. So let's think of one of the RF systems as a low-level investment that Tim mentioned, right? You've got a paper-based system now, and you've got 400 operators running around your facility with pick sheets and push carts. And you want to go to RF or pick-to-voice. Well, instead of buying 400 RF guns or 400 pick-to-voice systems, why don't we invest in a small segment? Pick 20. And we'll block off a section of the warehouse and do the RF or the pick-to-voice in that section. When you've ensured that you're getting the pick accuracies and the throughputs that you expected, now let's roll it out to the rest of the system. And so, if you think that automation is, really cool and technology is fun and it's great to have, first off, I agree with you, buy it. But let's be perfectly honest, everything needs to have a tangible buyback period. Money drives this industry, and an ROI is something that has to be evaluated. But there's a lot of factors that go into an ROI. It's not just throughput increases or picking efficiencies. Things like employee retention, workers' comp claims, free marketing from your automated solution are all tangible things that, while tough to quantify, should be factored into your ROI. A good example of this, I once worked with a small 3PL, and they did distribution for a newspaper company. And we automated their facility so that they could streamline their distribution, and everything went really, really well. They had about a 2-year ROI, I think. Everybody was very happy with it. Well, the newspaper manufacturer was extremely happy with it as well. Unfortunately, they didn't have any more business to give the 3PL. They already had all their business. But what the newspaper manufacturer did have was a sister company that produced magazines. Once the magazine company saw the automation the 3PL got, the 3PL was able to add a second shift utilizing that automation to distribute these magazines. They doubled their annual revenues without having to change their investment in automation, all from that free marketing they got. And I think the company owner told me a couple years back, once he factored in that new business, his ROI was less than 3 months. And it was just something that you wouldn't have been able to foresee. And so now that we've established some of the things that you want to look out for prior to implementation, what happens once the equipment shows up and your system is live? So a lot of knowledge can be gained during installation, project management, go live, acceptance testing. Make sure that you've selected a partner that's going to be there throughout all those stages, not just to get the system up and running, but to train your team on how to run it as well. So live on-hand training, classroom training, online training are all things that you should look for when selecting an integration partner. And then after the integration partner leaves the site, oh, pushing the wrong button, you're going to want to make sure that they have a support system in place. In a perfect world, you would implement automation, you would flick the on switch, and everything would work great, no issues. Unfortunately, industrial automation is not that simple. Issues are going to occur. From a hardware standpoint, make sure that you've identified your critical spares so that you've got those on hand. That way, should something go wrong, the system can be repaired quickly and you won't experience downtime. Make sure that there's an online spare part ordering portal or that you have a local rep that you can work with to get spare parts. From a controls and software standpoint, most issues can be diagnosed remotely nowadays, so make sure that there's a 24/7 support staff on hand. Make sure it's a call. Make sure you're actually going to talk to someone. Don't go to an automated system. Make sure that that support staff is trained on your system. There's nothing worse than getting a hold of a support tech and you can hear them flipping through the manual or trying to figure out your conveyor while it's down. It's the absolute worst. So make sure that that back end is there for you as well. And so finally, the last thing we're going to look at is just some of the benefits that you'll see from an automated system. So from an efficiency standpoint, you saw the chart that Matt laid out earlier, both from order accuracy and throughput. Automation really is second to none. An upgrade from a paper-based system to something simple like pick-to-voice or pick-to-light, which is those low and medium technologies that Tim mentioned, you're going to get 3x throughput improvement. From something like a pick-to-cart system to goods-to-man, you can get up to 8 to 10 times throughput improvement. So the efficiencies really are endless. You get improved employee morale. If you go into an automated facility versus a non-automated facility, there's a certain pride, a certain pizzazz, if you will, for the workers that are in that facility. Automation doesn't necessarily have to eliminate jobs. It just has to make jobs easier and repurpose that talent so that you're getting the most value out of it, like Matt spoke about. And also, it's going to give you the flexibility to move and grow. With real estate prices only going up and going to continue to go up, you want to make sure that your space is being used as intelligently as possible. One of the most wasted investments that companies make is vertical space within their warehouse. It's almost always underutilized. Modern day goods-to-man technologies, high storage solutions, dense storage solutions will make good use of that vertical space, opening up valuable floor space so that you don't have to move or add on buildings, and in some cases can even consolidate multiple facilities into one. And, kind of as I mentioned, it has the ability to inspire. There's nothing that brings a jolt to a business like automation. And that's both with employees, engineers, supervisors, managers, vendors, clients. The list really is endless. Anyone that has a touch on that business will feel the positive ramifications of automation. And lastly, if you look at anyone's budget sheet that runs a facility, where's the largest cost, right? It's labor. It's always labor. You have so much money tied up in labor, and it's really difficult to plan for. Your peak season, you have to bring in extra temps. Some might show up, some might not. There's high turnover in these positions. By automating, you're opening yourself up for more financial flexibility. This allows you to reposition that capital to more vital things like new client attraction, marketing, product improvement, process improvement. All of those things can come from that financial flexibility. And so I'm kind of on a last slide here. Thank you all very much for attending. I know it's a little late in the afternoon. Everybody probably just got done with lunch. We really appreciate everyone showing up. And there's a lot of good information to take away today, and this slide will be this presentation with audio will be available both on the MODEX website and the bastiansolutions.com website. You can also see us outside of the show if you have any other questions. But if there's one thing that I can really say take away is that automation saves money. That's really the long and the short of it. The industry is at a very very strong point in making these solutions financially justifiable, and there really has never been a better time to invest in yourself. So with that in mind, if there's any questions right now, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, like I said, we'll be outside.